systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 showdown stream for the Tour Championship. Gonna get you guys ready to build those lineups with a look at the weather report, some strategy for Friday as well. We'll also build a lineup or two together and go through any questions you've got in the chats to get you ready for all of your exposure. But hopefully you're having a fantastic Thursday out there. We got Go Collect in the chat, also C Floyd as well. Hopefully it's been a solid start for you guys. And for yours truly, it was about as good of a Thursday as it could have possibly been. Solid start for main slate for our placement exposure as well, and then a +9 unit day for the prop and the betting side of things. So feeling ourselves a bit, got some momentum heading into round 2, and let's build on that for the next few rounds. But let's start off with a look at this golf course, which played a lot easier than last year, and that was even after moving from a par 71 to a par 70. That was to be expected with some of the softer conditions. It was going to be pretty much a dart fest no matter what, but on top of that, you added lift clean in place. So that's why it played a whole -2.73, and with the thunderstorms in the forecast for tomorrow, there's a chance that they go with lift clean in place again. So if they do, expect at least a -2 scoring average, maybe even closer to the -2.5 that we had for today. If they don't go with lift clean in place, could play closer to like -1.5. So I think that's going to be the real big question mark for tomorrow. But because of the threat of storms, they're starting at 8 a.m. instead. So rather than about 11:15 start time, they're starting 3 hours earlier. And your last tee time for round number 2 is going to be at 10:44 local. So a much earlier window than what you had for the first day, which shouldn't change conditions all that much, but it does limit any sort of weather edge that would be there because a lot of this bulk of the storms are going to be in the middle to the late part of the afternoon. So if they went off in their normal tee times, maybe you could have played some of the earlier guys and hoped that they would avoid all of those potential storms, and maybe the later guys would catch a few of them towards the very end. But because they're starting at 8 a.m. instead, we're not going to have that sort of a weather edge. So this is the HRRR, which you don't really see those storms on it, but from the wind perspective, it looks almost entirely flat the entire day. I will go through a few of the other ones here, though, that have the storms in the forecast. NEM looks almost exactly same as the HRRR, though. But if you go to like the GFS, you'll see some of the storms. This one actually has them a little bit earlier in the day. The ECM model is the one that I think the PGA Tour was working with. They moved it up so they can try and get as much play in as possible. So I would say be mentally prepared for some sort of a delay tomorrow, that it's probably more likely than not that we have some kind of a stoppage in play. If it's like this GFS model, when it comes through early in the day, they might have to start an hour to an hour and a half later. If it ends up being this ECM model that ends up being a little bit more accurate, then they might even have to stop play in the middle of it tomorrow. So that's a possibility, not really anything that we can account for. But because there's only 30 players in the field and about a 2-hour, 40-minute spread from the first to the last tee time, there's not going to be that much of an advantage, or that much of an opportunity, I should say, to have a weather edge to lean into. So not a big part of our process for main slate, won't really be a big part of our process for round 2 showdown either. But if we get a slate where the weather kicks up a little bit more significantly, could be something that we look at for rounds 3 and 4, but hard to say without looking at those weather forecasts. And, if it's going to be anything like we have for rounds 1 and 2 here, not going to be a massive weather edge at this sort of event. But where we do get the big edge for round 2 showdown would be from the showdown on the ownership side of things, with game theory trying to get different compared to the rest of the field, which is what we're going to touch on here now. So I've got the top 10 highest owned players, which, considering there's only 30 players in the field, this is a whole third of the options that you have to choose from, to give you an idea of where a lot of the rest of the lineups are going to be going. And that's important to note when you're playing against the rest of the field, particularly in large field GPPs that are so top heavy with the payouts. If you're building lineups and you're not considering what your peers are doing, then that's just silly. That's nonsense if you're playing in those sort of GPPs. That is arguably the most important, most vital piece of information that you could possibly had when building your lineups. Because if you can take somebody that's lower owned than their counterparts and they have the same, if not a better day than some of their higher owned counterparts, then you're going to vault past those lineups in the large field GPPs. And that's what I think a lot of people don't really consider when it comes to playing DFS, is that you're not just trying to optimize on projection, enter cash lineups where you are just trying to take the 6 best plays together, but you're trying to take the best plays together that also beat everyone else that you're going against. So players like a Scheffler, who, is 14 grand, he's also 40% owned for round 2 showdown. It takes away a lot of that utility. Now, he still is world number 1, still is by far the best player that we have in this field. So that does, kind of outweigh the high price tag and some of that ownership, but it has to be taken into account. And outside of Scotty Scheffler, there's a massive drop off in that ownership. Second highest owned I have with Russell Henley after his -9 rounds. But as you can see here with this left tab, it's mostly the guys that played well for round 1 that you're going to see that steam behind for your round 2 showdown lineup. So Henley being a pretty predictable one, being your second highest owned player, but a Tommy Fleetwood, a Colin Morikawa, who posted some of the better rounds of the day, your Patrick Cantlays, your Justin Thomases as well, are significantly higher owns now than what they were for main slate because of how they performed in just this 18-hole sample size. And yesterday, Cantlay, JT, they were towards the top end of the board, and they were some of the lowest owned projected players that we had in the 8K range. Now they're the chalkiest players, or some of the chalkiest players that we have at that portion of the board. So it's just crazy to me how quickly people flip on players after just an 18-hole sample size, because we have to remember golf is extremely variant from event to event. Over an entire 72-hole sample sizes, there's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen even over an entire tournament. But when we're looking at just 18 holes of golf, one specific day, that is amplified to the absolute max. So if you're taking these round 1 results, the shots gained metrics, whatever data point it is from today, and you're using it too much for your round 2 process, you're going to end up on far too many of these chalky players. And, the round 1 overreaction is probably the biggest that we have the entire week. By the time we get to Saturday, Sunday, we might have some sort of an idea of, whether somebody has their best stuff or not on that given event. But after just one round, you can't lean into any of this stuff too much. So you could say that players like a Cantlay, a JT, that were, much lower owned just the day prior for the regular main slate would be bad plays for showdown for round 2, right? Because if you didn't like them for main slate at lower ownership, lower price tags, I believe in both cases, or at least in Cantlay's case, I believe he was a higher price now than what he was for main slate. If you didn't like him then why are you using him at these higher ownership marks? So that's how you want to handle the top end of the board. You can still make some conviction plays here and mix them into lineups, like a Scotty Scheffler, for example. Like, I could not give you too much crap for using them even at 40%. Guys like a Tommy Fleetwood or Rory McIlroy are even at like 25%. I still think kind of no-brainers to mix into like a 150 max pool. It's just that you have to account for it at some point. You've got to get differentiation. You've got to give yourself some leverage to move up in those GPPs, which is why, and we are going to go through the shots gain metrics. That is something we always do here on these live streams. It's why you have to have a more well-rounded process for getting to your plays, though. So you're not just using that round 1 sample size and playing all that chalk that ended up playing well. So, for example, a few of the different reasons that I use to getting to players, the first 2 of which do correlate with the shots gained metrics. Those would be your ball striking poppers and short game regression. We're going to talk through those here in just a minute. But I add on top of it course history and then also high upside players so that I can get some lower owned options into my player pool. And that helps me take advantage of this game theory, because when we go towards the bottom over here, and it's all the blacked out ownership, but like the bottom end of the board is mostly the guys that sucked, the guys that did not play well today. If we're going to use those guys, their shots gained metrics are not going to look good. Like, there's a reason why they're at the bottom end of the leaderboard. So if you're going to get more creative about it, that's why you need to have a few more things to use to get to players. So it doesn't have to be the exact same process that I have. This is, by the way, projections from my Patreon page. So these are the reasons that I use to build my player pool and the content that I provide for my members. But you can add on top of it, you can subtract things that you maybe don't agree with. You can look at Bermuda grass putting, that's the surface of the week. You can take a look at the proximity ranges on approach that are really heavy this week. That's 175 to 225, by the way, and use that to try and find some of your top plays. Just have a process for getting to your players. You want to be very intentional about who you're using so that after the fact, you can look back, kind of critique what went well and what didn't go well with your process, and become a better DFS player at the same time. So that's what I look for in my plays. We're going to go through the shots gained metrics now, but I think it's important to note the more creative ways that you get to players to try and get to some of those lower owned options, because, especially after round one, when you only have 18 holes to work with, vast majority of that chalk is going to be the players that played the best. Let's go through the shots gained metrics now. So I usually go with the ball striking stats first, as that is the most consistent part of golf from round to round. And ideally, we want people that are really into the green, but they're off the tee and on approach. So ball striking stats, by the way, are just a combination of shots gained off the tee plus shots gained approach. It's just a shortcut to give us, the combination of those two together. Number one, Jacob Bridgman, who is usually more of a short game player. So for him to have actually lost 2 strokes putting and then gained nearly 3 strokes ball striking is a little bit atypical, but a very good atypical sort of round for Bridgman. If anything, this is probably as favorable of a shots gained profile as we could probably find. Somebody that normally is gaining 1.5 to 2 strokes putting when he has a good day. That was about 4 strokes worse than that for round one. So we'll mention the short game regression in a second, but not only is he a ball striking popper, but also checks that short game regression box. But guys like Rory McIlroy gained 2.5 strokes ball striking, a Robert McIntyre, Patrick Cantlay, Akshay Bhatia, Russell Henley, and Scotty Scheffler. And this is where a lot of that chalk comes in. And I already talked about the top end of the leaderboard getting the extra attention, but on top of just being at the top end of the leaderboard, if you also hit the ball well for Thursday, those players get even extra steam for your round 2 exposure. So, I do have a lot of these guys in my player pool. I don't have all of them in my player pool, though. You're going to have to be very nitpicky about it, because if you want to play all of the really good ball striking poppers, then you're going to have chalk across the board. So that's why you have to be a little bit careful about it, not only just leaning into one aspect of golf, and you especially have to be careful with the ball striking, because it's probably the most prominent narrative that we have in this industry, is that ball striking is consistent from round to round. And, there's still some faults to that, right? It's not 100% effective from round to round. So that's why you don't want to take it too far. And as the years have gone on, these players have gone more and more steam in DFS as a result. So, maybe a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, there was a really big edge to looking at these ball striking poppers. There still is, an advantage to having that ball striking the day before. But from the ownership angle, the utility has started to get lower and lower as time has gone on. So that's why I personally really like to go just a few spots lower on the leaderboard. So like the range here where it's Sanjay, your Cam Youngs, even your Tommy Fleetwoods, Corey Connors, or Ludwig Ober's, maybe they're not quite as elite as those top tier players, but they gained ball striking in one of the best fields that we have in all of golf. So we've got to put some respect behind their names, especially like when Sanjay lost ball short game, when guys like Cam Young lost short game stats and are normally a lot better in those two categories. So that's personally what I'm using for my process. There's only 30 players in this field, so there's only so many I guess we can mention. Let's go to the short game stats. I also like to look at those. This is where there's a little bit more variance. So gaining a whole bunch of strokes putting one day or chipping in and gaining 2 to 3 strokes around the green is almost always just luck of the draw. So guys like a Russell Henley, a Justin Thomas, Morikawa, Scheffler that are heavily into the dark green with their shots gained putting, especially JT and Russell Henley, right? For 4 and 5 shots gained respectively, it's going to be really tough for them to back that up in back-to-back days. So for example, if JT or a Henley is going to go low and back up their low round and hold that 36-hole lead, it's probably because they have a really big ball striking day instead, which both are elite tier ball strikers. They are capable of having that sort of a bounce back day, but it's not like this dark green in the shots gained putting or the around the green is really that much of a good sign. So these sort of guys towards the top, I kind of give a little bit of a downtick to. Same thing with the around the green stats. If you're heavily into the dark green here, it's not really a good thing. A little bit less extreme than the putting stats, because with the putter, we have guys gaining 3 to 5 strokes per round. Around the green, it's usually in that like 1 to maybe 2 stroke range when you're having a really good around the green day. But if you combine the around the green and putting, you gained across both categories, and then you were average to below average in the ball striking categories, those are the kind of players that I'm actively avoiding for the next round. So that's how I use the short game stats to my advantage. You can look at some of the guys that struggled on the greens as well and kind of hope for a bounce back, especially if their ball striking stats were half decent. So I know we mentioned Coco as an okay ball striker before, gaining about 0.7 strokes between those two categories, but he also lost over 3 strokes short game. So he's the sort of player that we could easily see just even be a neutral for round 2 and then gain a stroke ball striking again. And that could be that -4 round round right there, let alone the upside for Corey Connors to gain a stroke or two around the green. So Shane Lowry, I would say that about as well. He could have been better ball striking, but he only lost about 0.2 strokes between those two categories. You would also say that about a Jacob Bridgman. We mentioned that one before. Even a Rory McIlroy is a bit of a short game regression candidate. And Sungjae M as well. Sungjae gained ball striking, but lost nearly 2 strokes in the short game categories. Those are, I think of all the players I just mentioned, I'm playing all but like one of those guys in terms of a bounce back for the next day. And on top of that, I am looking at those course history players and those high upside players to try and get some low owned players into my lineups. But that's essentially the strategy for round 2 showdown is you don't want to overreact too much. You want to use the shots gained metrics in places. But of my player pool for round number 2, guys, it's probably like half and half between the players that I'm using the shots gained metrics for and the players that I'm not using the shots gained metrics for. It's a part of my process, but it is far from all of my process at the same time. Let's see. You said everyone hit 6 of 6 who watched yesterday. Yeah, I would think so, especially on the prop side of things. I'm not sure if you watched that. We absolutely killed it over there. But yeah, it's a no-cut event, so I would hope that you have 6 of 6 at this point. But it's been a pretty good week so far, so we'll see if it can hold up. I have a lot of guys in the top 10 at this point. But like Griffin, even Brian Harmon, he didn't have really good rounds. They're still in contention at this point. I'll take it for sure. So it looks like we don't have any player pool deep dives. If you guys have any players you want my thoughts on, feel free to let me know. But that is my general take on the slate. And then when putting together lineups, it's just making sure that we have enough leverage and also making sure that we're not going to duplicate ourselves, which like main slate's a little bit harder on a week like this because we only have 30 players to choose from. So just like we talked about yesterday, I'm going to be leaving salary on the table in almost all of my large field GPP lineups. And just for the sake of transparency, I guess I'll tell you what I did for like my 150 max. I did not spend over $49,500. And I'm not sure if I mentioned that on yesterday's stream. I may have. It might have been something that I mentioned in passing, but that's what I did. And that's probably what I'm going to do again for tomorrow. And it might be a little bit less extreme. Maybe I bump it up like $100 or $200 because the showdown contests aren't as big for round 2 as what they were for main slate. So I don't know if I need as much differentiation to pull it off, but I'm leaving salary on the table on top of mixing in some leverage because even if you take the 6 lowest owned players, and again, I think I mentioned this on yesterday's live stream too, even if you ran that, your theoretical dupe percentage is well over 1. It's over 5 actually in the large field GPPs for this week. For showdown, it's not going to be as drastic. So I don't know if we have to get as different about it, but I'm still definitely incorporating that. So let's start off with a Rory at $11,200. It is going to be a little bit aggressive with our salary, but I'm okay with that. It's a slate with pretty soft pricing, so we don't have to worry about that aspect maybe as much as we normally would. I'm going to go with Victor Hovland with his course history. He's also a little bit lower owned than some of the other players around him, so that's a little bit of an added bonus on that sort of play. Let's go Cantlay at $8,400. Decent ball striking stats. Also a player with really good course history. Let's throw in Straka for a lot of leverage at $7,300. Straka's the lowest, I believe, either the lowest or the second lowest projected owned player on the entire slate. And the reason why I like a Straka, I am using him in my player pool, is he's a top 10 birdie or better percentage player. He also lost a whole bunch of strokes putting today. Didn't have the best ball striking performance, but maybe can kind of clean that up. And remember, he did not play last week. He had something personal going on. I don't want to speculate on what it could have been, but obviously serious enough that it kept him from heading to the BMW Championship and playing. It would be pretty reasonable to expect him to have some rust, maybe for round number 1. But like, if he can bounce back he's in last place. So like, obviously the form is pretty terrible, but if he bounces back, you're getting him at sub 10% ownership, especially in like single entries where the ownership's more polarized. Whereas a lot of the other guys around him are like 15 to 20%. So there's a lot of value in getting to that sort of player. So let's throw him in there. Let's use a Harry Hall for a lot of the same reasons. Harry Hall's another high upside guy. I believe he's the number 2 birdie or better percentage player that we have in all the PGA Tour. And in this sort of lineup here, we've got Rory, Hovland, Cantlay, Straka, and Hall. And if we spent all of our salary, you could probably do so and take Connors in like a single entry and get away with it. If you're in a contest with just a couple hundred entries, like, you don't have to worry about the duplicating like nearly as much as you do in other contests. But like in the big $5 or $25 for tomorrow, you're going to have to think twice about using a Corey Connors here. And that's why I'm setting that roll to leave at least $300 on the table. It might even be $400, $500 again, like I did for main slates, is to just further ensure that I'm getting that differentiation. So in the large field GPPs, you're not really going to see me taking that full $6,700 price tag. More than likely going down to guys like maybe a Sungjae Im. who hit the ball well today and maybe could be a little bit of a short game regression candidate, even a Bridgman at like $6,100, leaving that $600 on the table, is the sort of player that I would use in large field GPPs. So it's a little bit of a different slate. You have to force your hand a little bit more than usual because of the fact that it's a smaller field event. But it's not rocket science, right? It's not like it's impossible to get that differentiation in there. It's just that you have to be a little bit more intentional about it. And by the way, by leaving that at least that $500 on the table, I was unique in 96% of my builds. So I compared it to the rest of the GPP that I was in, and I was the most unique player of anyone that 150 maxed it. It's not that hard, but if you're somebody that isn't comfortable getting uncomfortable, then it is going to be very hard to get that differentiation. And to go back to the 18-hole sample size thing, it's only been one round of golf. You should be okay getting uncomfortable after just one round of golf, right? These guys that all shot -6, -7, -9 today, like sure, it could be it's good to be in a great spot like I am after the first 18 holes of DFS, but I know that could go to shit tomorrow. In fact, by the weekend, I could be cashing out on like 5% of my lineups for all of I know by the time that we get to Sunday. So keep that in mind when you're building. Like it's okay to get different. It's okay to really force your hand and get that differentiation, especially just after round number 1. So that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with everything that you guys are doing for round number 2. I'll see you guys for the round 3 and 4 streams as well after play-ins over the next few rounds. And of course, for the round 2 prop and betting stream, which it was another smash day today, +9 units into the profit. Last week was a +16 unit week. Our last 5 slates were +25 units into the profit. So averaging like 5 units of profit per slate. You don't want to miss out on that. If you guys are able to enter in sites like Underdog and Prize Picks, or the sports books for matchups, 2 balls, 3 balls, all of that kind of stuff. Make sure to check out that live stream as well. That won't be on this YouTube channel. That will be on my personal YouTube channel, GSLukeDFS. You can find that by just searching GSLukeDFS on YouTube. And we'll be live at 9 p.m. Eastern time with that. So if you have access to those books, make sure to stop on by for that. We really deep dive conditions over there. So it's not really just like picks and plays. That's not what this is either, right? It's a lot more process based. It's the same thing for that live stream. And I think a lot of people hear prop and betting stream and they go, oh, the guy's just going to spew off his picks. And that could not be further from the truth with what I do with my content. So just like it's process based here, it's the same thing over there. They go through pin locations, how that'll impact play. And we actually go pin location by pin location if we have the time to do so and show you exactly why it's going to play easier or harder. They go through the weather. We talk through the analytics from the day before. So all of the prop categories give you the averages for the field, you name it, right? So by the end, not only do you have some plays to use yourself, but you also have a really good idea of how to find some value on these prop boards. And that's the end all goal here, right? Is, if I really wanted to, I can make these live streams shorter, more concise, and just say, here are the plays that I'm using for the next day, right? And it would just be like every other piece of content out there. There's no value in that, right? Like, sure, you might get value for that one given slate, but you didn't actually learn anything to make your process better in the long term. So that's why I'm so process-based. And, I haven't always been that way. My guy, DGen75, absolute angel in the sky that's looking down on all of us, he implanted that in me. He used to kind of like make fun of me at times for being too much picks and plays based. And, it made me better, maybe a better tout, I feel like, over the years, and certainly is maybe a better player in the process too. So always just try and get better. Always try and learn from your mistakes. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days as well. The good days, figure out what went well and then continue doing that going forward. The bad days, go back and figure out what the heck went wrong, right? That's always something that's extremely valuable, and also something I learned from our guy, James. But that's all I've got. Best of luck, as I was saying before, guys, and I'll catch you guys for that prop and betting stream a little bit later on this evening.